Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
You're listening to Bloomberg Businessweek with Massar and Tim Stenovec on Bloomberg Radio.
Well, we are going all in on AI this last hour of Bloomberg Businessweek because here a sampling of just headlines today, Katie. We've got NVIDIA earnings Wednesday. Mm-hmm. Apple is eyeing robotics in search of life beyond iPhones.
I didn't know there was a life beyond the iPhone.
Well, 50% of revenue, roughly.
Right.
So they need to figure out what's going on, where the next
sure.
growth area is. AI frenzy set to fuel billions of U.S. high-grade debt deals. And check out this one. Elon Musk's Grok is a risky experiment in AI content moderation. Okay, just a sampling.
Yeah.
Dell also reporting earnings on Thursday. We're not going to ask John Rose about those earnings because I believe it's probably a quiet period right now. He is CTO and Chief AI Officer at Dell Technologies, usually in New Hampshire or Austin, but here in our Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio.
And John, it's great to have you in person. And first question has to be, you're the Chief AI Officer. How long has that role existed?
Yeah, that's a new one. There's, the CTOs have been around forever, but Chief AI Officers, at least at Dell, and really in federal government and a few other places, started about a year ago. It was a recognition that this is complex. It's bigger than an IT project. It has to have somebody carrying and feeding it because it was a lot of governance and technology coming together. So, for us, it was a year ago that we put the position in place.
We've talked about the Chief AI Officer in the context of the federal government and the new regulations around federal agencies needing a Chief AI Officer. Do you think that every company needs a Chief AI Officer?
I don't. I think some companies need Chief AI Officers if you're doing an at-scale kind of AI transformation of a large organization. But if you're a smaller organization, you need someone who's driving it. But do you need to change your organizational structure? For a company like Dell, we have literally hundreds, if not thousands, of projects that are going to happen, and 30% of our work is probably going to shift below the machine line. That is a gigantic effort, and having someone in the position from an executive perspective is necessary. But smaller companies are going to depend on companies helping them navigate this rather than creating organizational structures.
Well, I'm curious in your role how you juggle timelines, because you think about the here and now. It feels like AI has to be in every single conversation. You have a ton of companies trying to gain a foothold or get up to speed or play catch up, but then you also have this fantastic long-term opportunity that we talk about all the time that no one really knows what that holds. So, in your day-to-day, what does it look like trying to juggle those two?
Yeah, as a CTO, my job is to make sure we never miss a technology inflection. So things like quantum live under me, and these are long-term plays. One of the interesting things about AI, though, is that the future is happening now. Yeah. There is no 5-year journey that you're going to get to eventually. The disruptions are happening almost weekly, and so this intersection between execution and vision is more pronounced than any other technology I've ever seen. So, a good Chief AI Officer is not just an operational manager. They actually have to be extremely current with the technology and what is emerging so that they don't miss an inflection, which could happen in the span of like a matter of weeks.
I'm trying to figure out the way to ask this to contextualize it in the right way. But when we talk to people about AI, John, we oftentimes hear them say it's just like the internet in the 1990s. You're saying no.
No. On the scale of impact, it is. But I was involved in creating that era. I was the CTO of a bunch of networking companies in the 90s, and we had a decade and a half to kind of get there. And it happened slowly over time. It did have a profound impact. I think from a scale perspective, it's similar. But the speed in which this is happening, think about it. Let me give you an example. It'll be technical for a second. There's a term out there called retrieval augmented generation, RAG, which now is in the normal vernacular, which is amazing.
Katie, you never say that to me.
I say it all the time, man. Yeah.
We
were just talking about it in the commercial break. Come on.
So common term, very important technology, allows you to take your external data and use it with a large language model without the large language model absorbing it. That's pretty important, right? That term as a discussion in our industry is about a year old. It's foundational to almost every enterprise AI story that you can imagine. The technology didn't even exist 2 years ago. So the speed in which these things are happening, it's not like we've developed the internet and then we have 10 years to figure it out and mature it and then scale it. And 20 years later, everybody has to be there. This is, if you're not there now, or if you're not moving towards getting there, you're already late. And I haven't seen that happen in any other big technology inflection.
Is it more steam engine, like Jamie Dimon talks about, industrial revolution?
Yeah, it's after the steam engine existed and was commercially available, what you saw was this massive uptick. You had and it's actually a good analogy because the steam engine was a way to transfer energy. And you need to transfer energy to do all kinds of things, from producing goods and services to doing transportation, and so it became incredibly pervasive. AI is very similar. Anybody who tries to pigeonhole it, that it only does chatbots for searching stuff, or it only does enterprise applications X, Y, and Z is wrong, because it's a foundational technology. It's a different way to distill information into knowledge and wisdom, and you're going to apply it everywhere, much like we did when we moved to the internal combustion engine.
Well, let's talk about AI as it relates to Dell's business, because of course you've made an aggressive pivot when it comes to the AI server space. How different is the manufacturing and sales versus the traditional server manufacturing?
Yeah. First thing, maybe to dispel a myth, we didn't actually do an aggressive pivot, meaning about 4 or 5 years ago, we built our first AI servers, way before Gen AI. And the reason for it was that there were deep neural networks, there were early AI systems. Nobody understood them except maybe 100,000 people that were smart enough. And so we had been building these systems for quite a while and predicting that there would be a time where this would explode. This would be something that would be bigger. So when ChatGPT happened and suddenly Gen AI was available and we had this large language model explosion, we actually already had products that were ready to go into the market. And that's one of the advantages we had as this market formed. We were actually already there. And then what we had to do is adapt a little bit, but our supply chain was in place, our service organization was in place. We had to kind of optimize who we were selling to because it was new customers, but it wasn't really a gigantic surprise. The other thing that we have now concluded is that there isn't significant difference between the two markets in AI that we participate in. The first is the training market, these large-scale deals that we tend to be winning a lot of and are very interesting. And then the enterprise, which is actually not a training business, it's more of an inference business. It turns out that the products that we're building in the training side at scale transfer almost literally into the enterprise unmodified, which is a very good thing because we can address two markets with a portfolio.
Hey, John, one thing that we're really interested in is understanding who your AI server customers are today. We did see Michael Dell's tweet on shipping to Musk's XAI initiative. How would you define your AI server customers? Is it second-tier cloud that's accounting for the growth? Where are the traditional enterprise when it's coming to AI adoption?
Well, first, there's two very distinct markets. There is the traditional enterprise, which is still an early market. It's mostly experimentation. Those experiments are now graduating. I'll give you an example. Internally, we have a project that was first an experiment around our service organization of creating some tools that would allow people to make intelligent choices about troubleshooting a problem. We then very quickly moved from a prototype to thousands of people, and we're on a path to potentially 40,000 of our service technicians using this technology in a span of literally measured in 6 months or so. So the enterprise is on that journey. We haven't really hit scale in any meaningful way, but we have a lot of things in the pipeline as people are figuring it out. That market, I would say, is my view is a bigger market because there are millions of enterprises and every process in every enterprise is a target for this technology, but it takes time to get to a point of stability to transfer the knowledge and to basically get moving. Great future. The today market is mostly characterized by the ones you mentioned. It's companies that are building their own foundation models. They are training large-scale models. That's not what enterprises do. Enterprises use those models to do inference tasks. The training business is growing dramatically because, quite frankly, that's the underlying engine of all AI.
But is it only a handful of companies that are doing it?
It's not a very big market in terms of compared to the tens of millions of enterprises out there of all size that are going to use it. The people that are going to produce these models is not anywhere near that number. There's more than a handful of them. There are certain tiers of them, as you mentioned. There are even certain enterprises, very large enterprises. X would be a good example.
You're talking about the OpenAIs of the world.
Yeah, they're also training their own models. And so, but the thing that makes them all the same is every one of those companies is building infrastructure to train large-scale foundation models. Enterprises aren't. Enterprises are using those models, putting them into production, maybe fine-tuning them. And so there's a very different market forming, but they're happening kind of a little out of phase, but in parallel.
And I want to talk about the competitive landscape here. We have about a minute left with you, and then you'll be back after the commercial break. But when it comes to the competitive landscape, what does Dell offer that a Supermicro or even in NVIDIA doesn't?
Yeah, first of all, AI is not just a server transaction. There is storage, networking, but more importantly, it's especially when you go to the enterprise, it's end-to-end. when you're talking about deploying enterprise AI, you have to put it where your people and data are, which includes the AI PC, edges, distributed architectures. And that's why, while training may be able to consume servers just as a standard component, enterprise has to consume systems. And more the training infrastructures are consuming systems. And that's why our expertise in networking and storage and data center design, power cooling, all the things that we do, because we're very broad, come together and give us an advantage in both of those markets, more pronounced in the enterprise side.
John, stick with us. We're speaking with John Rose, Chief AI Officer over at Dell Technologies. We are back with John Rose, Chief AI Officer over at Dell Technologies. He's here in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio. Let's just jump right back into it. We talk a lot about power consumption, and with power consumption comes great responsibility. But actually, that's not really the quote. Heat generation, that's what comes with power consumption.
Yep.
What does Dell offer to help lessen AI's power use?
Well, the first thing is, first fact is when you add a whole pile of compute, you have to use energy to do that. And yes, AI is a significant increase in the overall power consumption because we've increased the compute capacity of the world by potentially orders of magnitude. The levers we have to deal with that are quite numerous. The biggest one that's going on right now is we're moving to direct liquid cooling in a more pervasive way, and that is a much more efficient way of getting the energy out of these systems and basically dealing with cooling. But that requires a retrofit of infrastructure and investment, but it turns out it does work quite well. We've been doing direct liquid cooling for, I think, 20 years. Our Alienware products and the gaming side have been doing this for, you can't buy one now that doesn't have direct liquid cooling. So it's a space that's important. But beyond that, there are other decisions you make. One of the most interesting ones that we're exploring, and this is more for the enterprise side, is once you choose to put your AI into production, there are two places in an enterprise that you can run it. You could run it in a data center, which is what people are starting with, or there's this little thing called an AI PC emerging, which says, what if I take that model, I re-quantize it, I basically make it small enough to run locally, and I move it out to the computing device, onto the PC itself.
Doesn't that still use the energy, but it just uses it locally rather than...
The energy is still being used, but the energy was going to be used anyway. Those PCs, one, they're distributed, so they're not sitting at one choke point on the grid. I don't need to put megawatts to a PC. I have AC outlets everywhere. I have batteries on them. And in fact, the total number of MIPS in the world sitting on PCs is probably bigger than the total amount of MIPS in a data center.
MIPS.
Million instructions per second, the measure of compute performance. And so the reality is, look at a typical AI PC today, and it's a relatively small amount of NPU capacity, neural processing unit capacity. But if you multiply that by a billion PCs, it's a pretty big footprint to go after.
What makes a PC an AI PC?
Today, the definition is that it has a neural processing unit. So in get technical for a second, all PCs have central processing units, x86 processors. That's what most of us run our stuff on. And then years ago, we put graphic processing units, GPUs, which now NVIDIA is quite popular with in the data center. Same architecture sits on almost every PC, just smaller scale. And then a few years ago, we started looking and saying, well, could we build an optimized processor that was really very power efficient to do AI tasks? That's called a neural processing unit. And so the latest, Intel processors, Qualcomm processors actually have all three on the system. And we just announced a whole bunch of Qualcomm-based AI PCs, and we have Intel-based AI PCs. And the thing that makes them an AI PC in most cases is it has all three of those processors. You put them all together, and you end up with a actually pretty beefy system that still is low power, runs on a battery, can take with you. The trick is, which we haven't done as an industry yet, is when we put the AIs into production, moving more of those workloads out onto those PCs moves them out of the data center. You've shifted the work, you've shifted the power and cooling, you've distributed it into a place that's ready for it, and that buys us a significant amount of capacity for the things that truly belong in a data center. We're going to do both, but today most people only do one of them, and they're not taking advantage of the billion PCs out there that could in fact be doing this work instead of in the data center.
Well, I'm glad you brought us to AI PCs because that's where I wanted to go, because Dell has been out front talking about AI PCs, really helping to start the conversation there. I think there's some stat out there that says that 40% of new PCs shipped in 2025 will be AI PCs. Does that sound realistic to you? What are you modeling?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the roadmap from Intel, definitely Qualcomm and others, they're all moving in this direction. Most of the latest Intel chips are absolutely, the ones that are coming and the ones that are in the market are qualified as AI PCs. The new Qualcomm chipsets that are now in the market on our products and starting to roll out, definitely AI. So it's not a function of, wanting to do something special. It's actually becoming mainstream. There will be non-AI PC chipsets out there because not everybody needs this, but in the business context, If you're going to put a Copilot out on a PC, if you're going to run that troubleshooting tool for your support group, if I can do that on an AI PC, the net impact is that it will be able to do it more efficiently. The NPU just uses less power for the same task, and so you end up with a much more efficient, much more performant system. Microsoft has released a whole pile of Copilot stuff that runs locally on, it's called Copilot Plus, and it includes image replacement and prediction, summarization. And they realized a long time ago that, hey, pushing a bunch of this stuff to be processed locally has a net effect from a sustainability and environmental impact of getting things into a place that already has the power to eliminate the burden on some of the data center architectures.
Okay, so what is a real use case for an AI PC?
Yeah, well, I mean,
Have customers figured it out?
They're figuring it out. The biggest one that's very visible right now is if you run the Copilot Plus technologies from Microsoft, which it's their kind of end-to-end stack. When you move them out onto the PC, one, it always works with you. Two, it generally tends to be more private data because the data doesn't move out into a cloud. And number three, the biggest impact is it just runs more efficiently. The non-Microsoft examples are already emerging. You have people like Adobe and others that are starting to think about how can I run my web app so that the processing is done locally to do background insertion. We have stuff that we built internally for our own uses around this troubleshooting tool and technology to help get a large language model powered AI engine underneath all my support technicians. Guess what? Dell support technicians rarely spend time in our data center. They're out in your data center and they got to bring those tools with them, and they might not have network access there because of security reasons. If I can bring the AI with me, then I guarantee a high quality of service. There's a lot of those and on and on. Remember, AI is horizontal. We haven't figured out all the use cases. Just ask yourself, where do you want to bring intelligence that augments a human being in real time efficiently? And that's where you need an AI PC.
On my shoulder.
Yeah, right. Just telling me what to do.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Can we talk about pricing here, though? When it comes to an AI PC, how do you price that relative to a normal PC?
Yeah, I'm not a pricing guy, so I have no idea what where the market will land. What we do believe is there's more value in an AI PC. If you have this ability to do these tasks in a more efficient way and a more performant way, and you can't do them on an alternative PC, clearly that has value. And we already have lots of pricing bands within our industry. There's a huge difference between an Alienware, gaming machine and a Chromebook. They are both technically PCs. One of them you can run high performance gaming on and the other one you can't. And so we'll see that kind of stratification occur, but these are not things that are exotic and out of the realm. In fact, our newest products, the Qualcomm ones we just released, if you look at them, they're pretty mainstream pricing. These are not the old days of you got to spend $5,000 for a laptop to do something special. It's kind of within the realm of normal pricing, if you will, but it is a value play in the sense that it does something that, quite frankly, is better than if it wasn't there.
Hey, John, very, very briefly, when you're thinking about money you're spending, where's the investment going? 30 seconds.
Investment in AI?
Yeah.
Or significantly. Two things. One, obviously, from a product line perspective, we are investing heavily on building out the products and services and technologies to enable our customers to build out their AI environment. And that's AI enabling and evolving our entire portfolio. From an internal perspective, we are absolutely focused on investment in transforming our business processes because that has significant return on investment of, if I make my service organization, my supply chain better, my company runs better. And so the one thing about AI investment is it almost always should correlate to a real ROI.
John Rose, Chief AI Officer, also Chief Technology Officer at Dell Technologies, here in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studios. This is Business Week.